Since ancient times, a metaphysical question has been debated, known as the problem of universals. The debate is on how properties of things, such as numbers, colors, or shapes, exist. Do they not exist in reality at all? And is it only mankind's a priori reasoning, which compares objects and attributes a common denominator which is coincidental and not real? Or, as the Greek philosopher Plato argued, are these properties, which he called forms or ideas, the true reality, with tangible objects merely mimicking these higher ideals as cheap imitators in our subjective reality? To put it another way, his theory of forms argued that blueness, roundness, etc. were the highest stratum of reality, the perfection blueprints allowing objects to have properties at all. How else could a blue ball have blueness, roundness, etc.? That is an individual entity, and we would not be able to recognize those properties unless those properties existed in some way as independent ideas which could be understood by gaining true knowledge, which could only be attained with distinctly sentient, a priori rational thought. The school of thought was also argued by Parmenides. The illusion of change was actually the substance of a thing persisting in reality, yet modifying its properties as a reflection of the ideals, which were stable, aspatial, and atemporal. Heraclitus counter-debated famously with the statement, "You cannot throw a stone into the same river twice," arguing that the riverness of, say, the Nile was actually a false reflection of the world, and in fact change was constant and chaotic. Plato's student Aristotle took a middle ground, disagreeing with his teacher. Aristotle is often considered the founder of empiricism. Rather than understanding the world through thought and knowledge alone, he argued that properties such as numbers and colors were coincident, natural kinds. The natural world was reality, and the perception of universal properties a matter of many individual objects coincident, with traits such as color simply a matter of predication when thought about. Empirical observation is the basis of the scientific method, that properties can be determined through natural observation and repetition. This allows for predication, which can be assumed but never proven in the context of logic. This concept has persisted through centuries, as evolution, gravity, and so much else is still said to be, quote, theory. But I digress. Items found in POE are obtained unidentified, and only usable until identified. The affixes exist within the item, yet only with our understanding of the object can these affixes be understood or even used. The item cannot be equipped unidentified. Assume an object which to an outsider is recognized as a baseball bat. With no understanding of baseball, it may be used as a weapon. It may be used as your mom's dildo. But ultimately, the blunt object was never a baseball bat at all. It never adapted those properties because it was never predicated in a way to be a baseball bat. And although its composition, surface treatment, shape, size, etc. were all properties of the object itself, without the a priori reasoning of the manufacturer, buyer, or sportsman, this object was never a baseball bat at all. And I believe this concept applies in POE. Is an unidentified Starkonjas a Starkonjas at all? I thus make this statement: a unique bear-shaped helm in POE 3.20, which does not give 150% increased global evasion rating when on low life, cannot be a Starkonjas, as that is a unique property of the Starkonjas. Since it does not apply this to your character unidentified, it is not yet a Starkonjas. And that affix certainly exists in a real way, independent of the Starkonjas head's silken hood existing at all. POE has proven Plato to be correct after all. It is only on application of the Scroll of Wisdom that the universal form can be accessed, the universal form which is literally the affixes of the Starkonjas. And that form is the knowledge which makes the reality of the game what it is. An unidentified item is unusable and therefore does not actually exist as its identified form independent of subjective knowledge. It is like a spoon ground down into the shape of a knife and then stabbing somebody with it, taking on independent properties of a knife, has made it a knife, and it's used as a knife. It is no longer a spoon at all. Just as the Nile River is still the Nile River despite its constantly changing composition. In this case, it is the riverness, but carved away into the shape of a giant lake. It would no longer be a river. The riverness persists despite new water, unless the object takes on the form of that new independent property. The universal property, Plato argued, persists atemporally and even aphysically. Let's look at the Scroll of Wisdom itself. You'll notice it has a maroon, red, burgundy strap attached to a wound scroll pointing at roughly 45-degree angle. You'll notice it is called the Scroll of Wisdom, stack size 1 out of 40. The subject matter identifies an item. When moved around, we will see that, indeed, we can have only up to 40 of these scrolls stacked, which begs the question, how are these stacked? They take up one space in your inventory, and it makes you wonder, are they layered flat against one another? The best means to store paper, after all, in a very compact way, or are they individually rolled into 40 scrolls? I don't see how this would be possible because of the amount of space. You could not stack rounded scrolls. Perhaps they are stacked flat and then rolled and coiled. Imagine coiling 40 into one chunk. Now, you'll notice the descriptor. Right-click this item, then left-click an unidentified item to apply it. This clicking must be done with your mouse. There actually is not a way to go into settings to modify this. If you change your right-click skill, you cannot furthermore change your right-click of using the Scroll of Wisdom. Now, to separate these, we hold down Shift and left-click, allowing a slider to be accessed so that we may separate the scrolls one at a time, or 2 or 3. We can then freely move them until it is placed by left-clicking again within our stash or inventory. Now, what if we need to procure Scrolls of Wisdom? You may find them by battling monsters in the field, or you can take these blue orbs and go to a vendor. Now you can place an Orb of Transmutation manually by left-clicking and moving it, or you can control-click, hold down Control and left-click, placing it immediately into the vendor. You'll notice you'll get 4 Scrolls of Wisdom for an Orb of Transmutation, and identically 4 Scrolls of Wisdom for an Orb of Alteration. This allows you to procure more Scrolls of Wisdom in order to identify more unidentified items. Now when ready, we will right-click alone without holding Shift or Control. You can click anywhere on the square holding the Scroll of Wisdom. You then will left-click onto the unidentified item. Furthermore, you can click anywhere within the squares holding this unidentified item in your stash or inventory. And instantaneously, upon click, the unidentified item label will be removed, revealing the affixes hidden within with a proper name, and the affixes will have various roles depending on the item itself and the properties we now have recognized by reading, quote, reading the Scroll of Wisdom, applying it onto the item. There are other less commonly used ways to procure Scrolls of Wisdom, besides chests and barrels, and crates and pots and urns, and scribe racks, and defeating slain monsters. There are other vendor recipes that I did not show in my showcase. You can take a proto-scroll for 1 Scroll of Wisdom at a vendor. You could take 1 armor scrap and get 2, or you can take 1 blacksmith's whetstone and get 4 as well. A Scroll of Wisdom will vendor for a scroll fragment, which is 1/5 of a Scroll of Wisdom. Therefore, this is the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals, to quote President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. Now you'll notice that a Scroll of Wisdom and an Orb of Scouring will give an item called a Book of Regression, which is non-tradable, which reduces your character level by 1 and resets your experience for that level to 0. Parandus Signet, or Signet, depending on your background. I believe Signet would be French. Signet would be my very American way of saying it. 3% additional chance for slain monsters to drop Scrolls of Wisdom. So if you want lots of Scrolls of Wisdom, you can dual wield this item here. There's also a Cloak of Talmur, not at all commonly used. Allows blue magic items to drop already identified. And that, my friends, is how you use a Scroll of Wisdom. That is the background on the Scroll of Wisdom. The item in Path of Exile, proving Plato's theory could be correct when it comes to metaphysical analysis of the properties of things.